How does a battlefield, a place no child should ever be or be a criminal, become the place where a child feels safest? This film answers that question without rushing. When our young protagonist is caught in the middle of war, his family is taken from him, one loss after another. The moment he is forced to confront the reality of his mother's death, the final emotional bond protecting him snaps. From this point forward, he is no longer just someone who is afraid. He becomes someone who must survive. At an age when he should be sitting still, processing grief, he chooses to run instead. Because war, as it always does, strikes children first. And childhood, it exists only in years, not in experience. If you were trapped in the middle of a war, having lost your family, what would you do? Most likely you would try to find a safe place and hide, but for this child, safety isn't about hiding. It's about belonging. That's why he chooses to go to the soldiers and begins to see that place as home. He is lost. He is afraid. But as he moves forward, he keeps telling himself the same thing. I'm not scared. Suppressing fear becomes the only way to survive. Here, the film turns psychology on its head. Courage is not a choice. It's a necessity imposed on the child, indirectly. And the fact that this story is based on true events makes it all the more crushing. Eventually, the child collapses in a corner of the forest, overcome by hunger and exhaustion, and falls asleep. A soldier finds him and takes him to the unit. From this point on, there are two paths ahead of him. He can either heal like a child and be sent to an orphanage, or push beyond his limits and become a soldier. As his wounds begin to heal, the child wins the soldier's affection. They too are broken, burdened by losses, surrounded by the wounded. His presence brings brief moments of joy and relief to the unit. Through him, the soldiers are reminded of their own humanity. But beneath that fragile sense of normalcy lies the child's deep pain. His family is gone, and that loss lingers quietly beneath the unit's temporary happiness. While the soldiers believe they are protecting him, they don't yet realize what the sorrow growing inside the child might turn into. Throughout the film, we often see the child soldier as cheerful, even happy. But at this point, an unavoidable question emerges. Was the child in the real story truly this happy as well? Did he join the unit out of a desire to avenge his family, or because choosing courage felt better than living as someone afraid? Perhaps it was both. The film never gives a direct answer, and it is precisely this uncertainty that becomes the story's most striking point, because the child's happiness may not be a choice at all, but a mask he builds in order to survive. Once the child begins to recover, the officer wants to send him to an orphanage, but the child refuses to leave. This decision creates a quiet tension within the unit until the officer tears up the paperwork. This moment is more than the child being accepted as a soldier. Here, the officer accepts him as a son. The film never names this bond outright. Instead, it lets us feel that another absence in the child's life is slowly being filled. While all of this unfolds, the war never stops. Bombs keep falling, guns never fall silent. The wounded and the dead continue to pile up. In an environment that would break even an adult, the child wakes up early every morning, gets ready, even shaves. He goes to the front line, carries ammunition, delivers messages, takes on tasks far beyond his age. We no longer see fear in him. Over time, it is replaced by a kind of learned courage, and in this state, he begins to earn the admiration of everyone within the unit. At a certain point, we begin to grow accustomed to seeing a child soldier. Even we, as viewers, start watching these moments without questioning them. Why did the child become a soldier? When did he begin carrying ammunition to the front lines? The film never answers these questions because instead of explaining this transformation, the film normalizes it. And yet, he is still a child. At an age when the only thing he should be doing is playing, he learns that weapons can be both cold and warm. The fact that this story is based on real events makes it even more disturbing. This child grows up surrounded by wounded and fallen soldiers, and for that very reason the film doesn't just show a child becoming a soldier, it teaches us to accept it as well. At one point, the officer is unable to establish contact with another unit. Without hesitation, the child steps forward and attempts to repair the broken connection. The war continues at full force, but for the child, this has already become ordinary. When he is told that he shouldn't be there, his response is simple: I'm too small. They won't shoot me. The child knows how young he is. He knows exactly where he shouldn't be, and yet he still places his hand beneath the fire. Here, the film presents courage not as heroism, but as the result of having no other choice left. Whether it is right or wrong no longer seems to matter. The film makes us watch a child as a soldier. Our eyes adjust to it, and at a certain point, we begin waiting for what will happen next. Even the bombs exploding beside him no longer unsettle us, but something becoming ordinary does not mean it stops being wrong. If his mother were still alive, she would have shouted for him to run at the slightest danger. She would have protected him. The film tries to fill this absence with a nurse, but this can never replace a mother, because a nurse heals, a mother protects. When he is asked where his mother is and cannot answer, it becomes the film's quietest and heaviest moment. So where does this child find his courage? The truth is, he doesn't. Throughout the film, we see that the child is afraid. At the very beginning, his constant repetition of "I'm not scared" is a sign that he is trying to suppress that fear. The child is afraid, but he moves forward because he is even more afraid of stopping. The only place left to run is toward those who appear the bravest, the soldiers. Once he reaches them, fear doesn't disappear. It is simply buried. The film repeatedly shows us how brave this child is, but at a certain point, that bravery stops being questioned, because war doesn't just destroy children, it destroys childhood itself. This story does not create a hero. It shows a child who has no other choice left, and what remains is this feeling. The child didn't grow stronger, he only learned how to endure. By telling this story in a calm, almost silent way, the film makes us feel just how normalized this transformation becomes. And that leaves us with one final question. If a child has to give up their childhood in order to survive, can that ever truly be called a victory?